Well, good afternoon and welcome back to day 2 of WordPress Disaster Week here on iThemes Training. My name is Nathan Ingram. I am the host here at iThemes Training, and I'm joined today by Michael Moore. Michael is the Associate Product Manager for iThemes, and after several years of working in support, today Michael focuses on innovating new features and products to serve our wonderful community here at iThemes. So, Michael, it's great to have you back for day 2 of Disaster Week.
Yes, I am super excited to be here. We had a fun day yesterday, lots of great questions. I'm hoping we have as many eager participants today as we did yesterday.
Absolutely. So just a few notes of housekeeping as we get started today, especially important on these larger webinars like we have for Disaster Week. First of all, if this is your first iThemes training webinar, welcome. If you're a first timer, let's hear from you there in the chat room at ithemes.com/chat. If this is your first webinar, just say, hi, first timer here. We'd love to welcome you. Hey, Mike, glad you're here as a first timer. Julian, awesome. Matthias, yesterday, yeah, great to see a lot of first timers here. Linda, awesome. Yeah, and a few of you not so much first timers. Chelsea, welcome. Just a few notes that you might want to know as we get started here. We have a live chat room going because there's frequently questions and conversation that happens between audience members as we go. A lot of times there's valuable information that's shared. So the chat room is helpful to connect everybody together. Also, it lets me share links such as today's slides, which I'm dropping in the chat room again, as well as the replay link, where the replay of today will be posted in about an hour after we wrap up this afternoon. Also, the replay from yesterday is on that page, and all of the slide downloads for yesterday and today are there also. Just save that link, and you'll be able to go back and rewatch and download all of the things in Disaster Week going forward from here. So, one more very important thing. This is a live webinar, and we encourage interaction, which is why we have the live chat room. So ask your questions as you have them. You can ask them in context, and my job as the host is to save those questions off to the side, and we'll get those to Michael as we come to a time of Q&A. Hopefully we might have some other iThemes folks in the chat room to field some of those questions as we go as well. We'll see if that works out. One thing I will ask you, if you have a question, please do not use the GoToWebinar questions feature or the chat feature there. Instead, go to ithemes.com/chat and ask your question there. That's easier for me to keep track of everything in one spot. So ithemes.com/chat. The only other suggestion I'd have for you, if you have a question, put question at the beginning, preferably in uppercase. That way I know it's a question. It's going to catch my attention. And then as you ask a question, just kind of watch the chat room for the next couple minutes just to make sure I don't, in case I have a follow-up question for you, just to make sure your question is good and answerable when we get that over to Michael. So with that covers everything. Welcome everybody once again. Let's start with day 2 of Disaster Week talking about recovery. Michael.
All right. So today we're going to go over 3 main points. The first point is going to be the different types of security activity that you should monitor. And then we're also going to talk about recognizing the signs that your site has been hacked. And then we're also going to talk about how to recover from a hack or other disasters. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. All right. So it's super important that you monitor specific WordPress security activities. You can do this by adding a WordPress security log. Now, you're going to have several different benefits from a WordPress security log. If your site does get hacked, you'll want to have the best information and to aid in a quick investigation and recovery. So, 4 main goals. You're going to want to identify and stop malicious behavior, spot activity that can alert you to a breach, assess how much damage was actually done to the site, and also aid in the repair of a hack site. Those are the 4 main goals that you want to get out of your security logs. Now, there's a couple different ways that you can add WordPress security logs to your site. One is you can use some development functions and filters that you can find in the WordPress Codex to add, or you can use a WordPress security plugin like iThemes Security Pro that will automatically track different security activity for you. If you have iThemes Security Pro installed, you'll be able to start tracking things like local brute force protection, ban users, database backups, file change detections, malware scan, user logging, version management, and more. So again, it's good to have a tool put in place to monitor this activity. So 4 important events that you want to monitor is going to be the WordPress brute force attacks. If you were here yesterday, we know that the brute force attack is the random guessing of combinations of usernames and passwords. Hopefully find the correct one to log into your site. Different file changes that are happening on your site. When a scanner scan and record those malware scans in your log, and also user activity. Who's logging in? Who's logging out? Who's updating pages? Who's installing, deactivating plugins, updating, and so on. So here's an example, just a screenshot of the WordPress security logs and iThemes security. And as you can see here, you see that there's these brute force attacks that happen, and that these are the hosts that were involved. And so what you want to the important thing is identifying these malicious actors and identify that behavior, so you can put a stop to it. Because fortunately, like, brute force attacks aren't super difficult to stop. It is pretty easy to see to record failed login attempts. So once you're starting to record these failed log attempts, using a WordPress security plugin like iThemes Security Pro, you can actually lock out these users because by default, WordPress doesn't track any user login activity. So there isn't anything built into WordPress to protect your site from a brute force attack. So it's up to you to monitor your login security to protect your WordPress site. So if a single IP has consecutive multiple failed login attempts, the chances are you're under a brute force attack. So while you're recording these, once that IP has hit a threshold, let's say 5 invalid login attempts, you might want to go and lock them out and give them a quick timeout before they can make any more login attempts. Otherwise, they're going to have all of eternity to guess random usernames and passwords, and eventually they'll find a correct combination and gain access to your site. Now, the next thing you're going to want to record is file changes. Now, there are several legitimate reasons why file changes might occur on your site. One is if your site has been if you have a plugin update. So another thing is, have you updated your theme or made any custom CSS changes? Have you updated WordPress core? So there's plenty of legitimate reasons of why you might have file changes on your site. So iThemes Security Pro will actually use these in the file change detection setting. You can enable the online file comparison. And what that will do is every time you update a WordPress core plugin, and if you update WordPress core itself and any iThemes products, these there's going to be a file hash associated with the update. So let's say that you have a file change happen on your site and you want to confirm that that change is legitimate. You could compare the file hash of the version installed on your site to the version installed on the WordPress.org repo. And if those file hashes match, chances are it was a legitimate update and there's nothing to be concerned about. You can also, if you go to the WordPress.org codex, there's some WP CLI commands that you can run to run the WP core verify checksum commands. And then you just go in your terminal, go to your site, run these commands, and it'll do that checksum for you. And again, you can do this. iThemes Security Pro will do this automatically for you. Themes is not currently available right now for the verify checksums. It's on the roadmap. It's been on the roadmap for 3 years. I'm not sure when we can expect to see that, but hopefully it will be soon, because it's a cool little feature that you can do. It's a real simple WP CLI command that anyone can take advantage of to ensure that the file hashes are actually matching. Another thing is malware scans. So it's not just okay, so you want to record every single malware scan. And the reason why you want to record every single malware scan is because you want to know if the scan is failing. So it's not just enough to get a notification of any kind of failed malware found. You want to know if your sites actually be scanned on a daily basis, because not knowing if the scans on your site are failing could result in your site not being regularly scanned for malware. And it is super, super important to know as soon as possible that your site has been infected with malware, because the sooner that you can identify it and the sooner you can start the cleanup process, you're going to mitigate a bunch of damage, and it's going to be the sooner you find it, the sooner you're going to be able to get your site back online. And user activity, this is another super, super important one, because when you are recording, especially like of admin users, if you're recording when they're logging in, where they're logging in from, and what activity they're doing once they have actually logged into the site, you can tell. Let's say, for example, like you're looking at your security logs and you see that all of a sudden you have a user with your user logging in at a weird time from, whoops, let's go back a slide, from a weird location. That might be just the thing that you need to realize that your site has been breached. And once you see that, you can then, from the time they logged in on that suspicious IP, you can track their steps and see what malicious behavior they were up to if it was indeed a malicious attack. Here's the different types of user activity you should think about. Recording is going to be logging in and logging out, adding and removing plugins, user creation, and this is a big one, changes to posts and pages. So, it's if someone has modified a post or a page, it could be to add a malicious redirect to a site, to their site, or to create some kind of man-in-the-middle attack. Adding or removing plugins, this could be them uploading a malicious plugin or deactivating a security plugin. User creations, let's say that what we talked about yesterday with that Gentoo breach, where that person actually removed all the other admin users, and then them getting a notice of all these other admin users being removed is actually what identified them to the first, or alerted them to the first place that there was a breach that had taken place. So, keeping track of this different activity is going to be your best efforts to identifying a breach as soon as possible. Because again, we want to find that as soon as possible, because as soon as we find it, the less damage that can be done and the faster it is to get your site back online and the easier it is to restore. So as we can see, having the right information at the right time can help stop an attack, alert you to a breach, pinpoint the time of a breach, assess the damage, and help you with the cleanup. And then we're going to go through this a little bit more detail later on in the webinar when we actually go onto a site and look at the logs in real time. So again, it's good to have those WordPress security logs monitoring the right activity. That way, you are, one, protecting yourself from brute force attacks, and having that important information of what if someone hacked your site. So moving on, we're going to talk about 7 signs that your WordPress site was hacked. So this seems like an obvious one, right? Your homepage has changed. Some hacks, the only goal is that someone trying to troll your site, although the only thing they do is change your homepage to something that they find funny or leave their hacked by calling card. If you do notice your homepage has been changed, you can just restore your site. Now, again, this does seem like an obvious one, but I don't know about you. There's plenty of times that I'm doing something on a site. I go directly to the login page, and from the login page, go directly to the WP-admin. I never even visit the front of my site. So part of your routine when you're thinking about the security of your site and thinking about monitoring its health is you're going to want to do occasional checks on the front end. Is everything how you left it? Or has something been changed maliciously? Are your links still pointing to the right direction, or pointing up to the right direction? So again, it seems like an obvious one, but you'd be surprised how often someone's site is hacked and they go an unnecessarily long time without getting it fixed. Another thing is if your site performance has dropped. So if your site is feeling sluggish, it could be a sign that your site has been hacked. If you are experiencing slowdowns, or if you're having a large number of brute force attacks, or there's a script using your server resources to mine for Bitcoin. That could be a sign of your, all that slowdown could be a sign of one of those different types of attack. A DDoS attack or denial of service attack is when a network of IPs will simultaneously send requests to your site and attempt to cause your site to crash. So this could be, again, like there's these, some people just, their definition of fun is quite different than mine. And so just because they can do it, they will do it. And there's really, really simple tools that you can get online that you just put in an IP address of a website, another person, and then you can, with the click of a button, just send a bunch of requests simultaneously to DDoS, either their home ISP or take down a site. Now, we're dealing with a DDoS attack. There's two main ways that you can mitigate it. The first is to purchase more hosting than you actually need. So if you ever do have that all of a sudden surge increase of simultaneous requests to trying to crash your site, if you have enough server resource overhead to deal with that extra load, that will help your prevent your site from slowing down. Or you can use a web application firewall like we talked about yesterday, either Security or Cloudflare, and that way that can help prevent those requests from ever even touching your site. So because they'll act kind of as like a man in the middle, so they'll recognize that all these attacks are coming from a similar source and recognize that this is attack, and so they're going to stop that from ever actually hitting your site. So you won't even notice a slowdown in a lot of cases if you're using a web application firewall. And your site also might contain malicious spam or pop-up ads. There's a good chance that your WordPress site is hacked if your visitors are reporting seeing pop-ups or are being redirected to pages that have nothing to do with your site. So this does happen, and I've seen this quite a bit from my time in iThemes security support. And just to tell you an embarrassing story, this is a lesson learned on my case. I had someone report that their site may be hacked, and they're reporting that they were seeing these different pop-ups and that it was only happening on their site. I couldn't recreate it, so I assumed that their actual device that they were on was actually the one that was hacked, because I had that happen when I was running a Windows machine. I had a virus on my local machine that anytime I opened up any site, a bunch of pop-ups would, no matter where I went, pop-ups, and I completely reinstalled the operating system to remove that. And so that's what I thought they were suffering from, since I wasn't able to see it. But come to find out, guess what? I had an ad blocker on. So when I went to their site, I never saw them. I never saw the ads. And it wasn't until I realized that and I disabled my ad blocker that I actually was able to recreate what they were seeing. So if you are getting reports of this, but you're not able to recreate it, this could be of two things. First, most obvious thing is you have an ad blocker installed. And the second thing is some of these are actually really sophisticated in the way they handle who they show pop-ups to. So if it seems like your IP address is an admin user, they will whitelist your IP from ever seeing the ads. Or if it seems like it has a similar behavior of like a security researcher, will whitelist that IP too. So the person who's actually put in charge of cleaning your site will never see it either, because of they make sure when they're phoning home that they don't ever serve you or the security researchers the advertisements. Luckily, you can still view page source, and you can still see that maybe there's a malicious script there that you wouldn't have expected to see there, and then go that route. It was a pretty interesting. One day I had Christine, the former lead developer of iThemes Security Pro, who really, he walked me through the identifying this breach and this malware, and he was the one that figured out that they were whitelisting our IP so we couldn't see the pop-up ads. So I thought that was clever. Hats off to when they're due, even when it's to attackers, but that's just something to be cognizant of if you are getting reports of this kind of behavior, but you're not able to recreate it. All right, and then you have another sign that you were hacked is that you have a decrease in site traffic. So if you log into your Google Analytics account and you notice that you have a steep decline in traffic, your WordPress site could be hacked. A drop in site traffic definitely deserves some investigation on your end, because what could be happening is that a malicious script could be redirecting everyone who's trying to visit your site away from your site to a different site. And I've seen this one live in action before too, and it is it's just crazy that I think a lot of this might be these clickbait farms. And so what they're doing is they're trying to get as much traffic for these pay-per-click stuff. And so they put out these malicious scripts to make sure to artificially inflate the amount of traffic their site is getting. And so once you're redirected, the site could look completely normal. There's no malicious thing. There's nothing trying to get you to enter in some credit card information for them to steal it. They're literally just trying to steal their traffic so they can sell that traffic as a part of like pay-per-click stuff. Again, this is something we talked about as unexpected file changes. If files on your site have been changed, added, or removed, this could be a sign that your WordPress site has been hacked. So let's say that you have iThemes security installed and you have file change detection installed, and then you get a notification that something has changed. And let's say that there was a change to a specific plugin, and that you go look in your security logs and you see in your version management of this plugin, you don't see a record for whatever reason of this plugin updating. So what you can do is get a copy of the file that has changed, and then compare it to a copy of that plugin, download it from the developer's website, and compare those two files. And if they match, you're good, but there's some differences there. You're going to want to probably reach out to that developer to see if they can explain that. And if they can't, unfortunately, your site might have been exploited and compromised. Here's another big one: unexpected new users registered on your site. So there was a part of that social warfare hack last year, which is a pretty big hack. So they were able to do a SQL injection. So even if you didn't have, if you disabled anyone can register on your site, they injected it to change those WordPress options to make you allow anyone can register on the site. So they would change that option, and then they would register, and then they would inject more things in your database to change that subscriber user to an admin user and then take over your site. So if you are seeing any new unexpected users, this could be a telltale sign that you've been hacked. Unfortunately, I've seen this way too many times of unexpected users being created and their privileges being escalated from subscriber to admin. So this is definitely something to be aware of and keep an eye out. All right, and then also admin users being removed, like we talked about again yesterday. The Gentoo hack, the only reason why they knew is because their admin user was removed. They removed every other admin user, and that was the only way that they knew that they were actually hacked. So if your user has been removed, or if another admin user has been removed unexpectedly, this could definitely be a sign that your site has been hacked and there is someone who has access to your site that really shouldn't. So the security cards and the iThemes security dashboard, what these are is they so the security logs, there's a lot of great information in there, and but unfortunately, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So we wanted to create this security dashboard to give you information in bite-sized, more consumable chunks. That way, we could bring to your attention exactly what you need to know and what you need to be aware of. You can check to see what the password ages of people, see what their password strength is, see whether or not they have two-factor enabled. That's not a good sign. Two-factor is not enabled. That's foreshadowing, guys. Okay, so real quick, let's talk about creating a backup strategy. Before we continue, do we have any questions? Is this a good place to stop for questions, Nathan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a great place to stop. We do have, as you can imagine, quite a few questions. Folks are asking wonderful questions in the chat room. And again, if you'd like to ask a question you haven't yet, iThemes.com/chat, iThemes.com/chat. Just drop that question in and I'll get it over to Michael right now if we're talking about security and hacking. Okay, so Steve asked, if a user gets admin access to a site, are they able to issue PHP commands? Like, for example, he said, we had a site, wasn't sure if it's hacked or not, but all the tables on the site were truncated and the iThemes tables were deleted. You ever heard that happen before?
Not specifically that, no. But that being said, if they do get access to the admin of your site, and because here's the thing, like if they get access to your site and then they can use the file editor, your PHP credentials are stored in your wp-config.php file. So if you have anything on your site that allows them read access to your wp-config file, then they can easily get your database credentials from there and then go and inject code into your database. So yeah, they definitely can do that. One of the things that we do recommend doing, if you have both the free or the pro version of iThemes Security, you can, in the WordPress tweak settings, you can disable the file editor, because if you go to, let's show you the security setting real quick, because I think it's probably enabled in the site. So disable file editor. I'm going to disable that real quick. Let's reload the page so I can show you. So if you go to like plugins, for example, or where am I looking for? Where's the tools? Sorry, it's been a while since where's the file editor at?
You may have disabled it.
I think, did I just disable
plugins usually has an editor, and the theme under plugins and under appearance.
Okay. So, so what you can do is, here we go. Plugin editor. You can modify code here and any of the plugins and put your own code, and then that way it can run and do stuff. So, for example, like if they need to modify some code here or install their own plugin that has code to modify your database, they can do that from there. Also, the theme editor, you can modify and add different functions here that could add malicious scripts that could then possibly inject code into your database. That's why I would definitely recommend requiring any kind of file editing to be done either via the command line or via FTP. So again, and both the free or the pro version, if you just go to WordPress tweaks and then disable file editor, that will help prevent some of that from happening. If a lot of times when your site does get actually hacked, it's just a stupid bot trying to do the only what is told, and a lot of times it won't know that it should be looking to see if the file editor is disabled or not. But that is not a foolproof method, but that is definitely something you can do to help prevent changes like that from happening from the WordPress admin.
Yeah, very good. Let's see here. Shayna had a question. Is there a way you can know that a DDoS attack is happening?
There's no like true firewall, but what you can do is you can take a look at, well, if you're using like a WordPress application firewall, a lot of times you can see all the traffic that's hitting your site live. And that would be a good indication of if you're getting a absurd amount of requests that compared to normal, you might be under a DDoS attack. Another thing you can use, if you have your site hooked up to Google Analytics, a lot of times you can see live traffic from that your Google Analytics dashboard. If you're using a web application firewall, a lot of times you can monitor the site activity from there. And also, if you have none of those things, you can also go to your server and take a look at your access logs and see that will show every single request that has happened on your site and what IPs are associated with those requests. So those are just different ways that you can see if there's a unusual spike of requests that could definitely be a sign that you're under a DDoS attack.
Very good. So earlier you talked about ways people, or a bad actor, a malicious actor could bypass the standard WordPress user registration process, get an admin user set up. Is there a way that we could know that happened? I mean, I know that if you create a user through their existing WordPress interface, usually, unless it's disabled, WordPress sends an email to the admin email of the site. But say they bypass that standard mechanism, is there a way to know other than checking?
Like you said, you'll most likely get an email showing that those users have been created. But other than that, I don't know of a way other than like actually checking and looking, because at that point, um, just depending on what they're doing, because I'm trying to think, because typically though, you're going to get alerted when a new user has been created, a new admin user has been created on their site. So I don't know. Do you know another way, Nathan, other than receiving the email notification?
I do not.
I do not either.
So that sounds like it'd be a good post for the iThemes blog. Perhaps. Let's see here.
Writing that down in my notes right now.
Yeah. All right. Several questions still left here. Let's see. Stacy said earlier on her server logs at Liquid Web showed a brute force attack. However, the logs in the security dashboard didn't show anything, and the IP address for the brute force attack wasn't locked out. Any idea why it wouldn't show in security versus the server log?
No, I apologize. That's only enough information for me to make speculations, but not give you anything definitive. Because iThemes security and it's getting the information from the server and the server logs, so that information should match. But again, without any additional information, I would not be able to say anything definitive. I apologize.
Gotcha. No, and that was just enough information for me to raise an eyebrow myself. So I didn't know if maybe you had some good insight. Let's see. Roy would like to know: is there a way to monitor sites in bulk? With several sites, sometimes emails come in fast. Oftentimes, it's just failed admin logins. And I think what he means there is there a way to change the settings so maybe we don't get a million emails when the site is under attack?
Yeah, that's like honestly, I was talking to Sailor, a designer, yesterday, and she was looking at some stuff, and then I was telling her that when it comes to iThemes security, it just really likes to brag about everything that it's doing. And so one of the first things I do, especially if I'm setting up, helping a friend or someone set up a site, is I enable the security digest, make sure this is enabled. And then I disable the site lockouts, because I don't need to know of every time a site is being or someone's being locked out. And so I can just get this daily digest, because it says exactly right here. During periods of heavy attack, iThemes theme security can generate a lot of email. The security digest reduces the number of emails sent, so you can receive a summary of lockouts, file change detection scans, and privilege escalations, minimizing the amount of emails. Because I'm sure if you're anything like me, if you're getting a ton of these notifications, it becomes like the boy who cried wolf kind of thing. And it's hard to differentiate with what's important and what's not. So I always try to disable this site lockout notification to kind of quiet that noise some, because I want to quiet that noise, because I only want to get the information that I need. Because all a site lockout is telling you is that iThemes security worked and it did its job and it locked them out. I don't need to know that it did its job. Just do your job. And so I would definitely, because especially if you are getting brute force attacks, you can get like inundated with like 100 emails in an hour, and which has happened to me before. And so just disable this, and you can get a summary of it at the end of the day.
Yeah, very good. So let's see here. Great suggestions from folks in the chat. I really appreciate all the questions and ideas here. Let's see. Betty had a question, and I'm going to answer this one because we're going to deal with it tomorrow. Betty wanted to know, does iThemes Security Pro have recommended settings? There's so many, and Betty, you're exactly right. So one of the things I'm going to be talking about tomorrow is setting up security for a client. And so we'll go through some of those things. And I'll also provide the export file that iThemes Security creates so that you can import the settings that I use, but they may not exactly be the ones you want to use. But we'll talk through some of that. And in just a minute, I'll share a link in the chat room about when we actually did a deep dive into all of the setup through iThemes security. I think that was back in January. Michael and I did that webinar. So I'll provide that in just a minute, but just come back tomorrow and we'll be dealing with that in particular. By the way, folks, I posted this in the chat earlier, but the times for tomorrow's webinar are different than it has been for the last couple of days. We will be on from 10 a.m. Central to noon Central time tomorrow, and that's when we'll be talking about setting up the site for the client and providing security services for clients. Okay, back to some more questions, and boy, we got some good ones here. Let's see.
Real quick,
yes.
Just to touch on that just for a second. If you run the secure site from the security check module, this will enable all the recommended features that are okay to run on every single site. So these are going to at least enable the settings that aren't going to create a conflict on your site. What Nathan's going to cover tomorrow is going to be a lot more in depth than this, but this will at least get you started. So again, you can find that in the security check and then just run the secure site. I'll run it and I'll enable some of these settings for you.
Exactly. Let's see. Paul would like to know, he said, I moved my WP config file up to the same level as public HTML. Is that still an effective thing to do?
I don't think so. I don't think that provides any additional benefit. So that's not something I would recommend doing, no.
All right, let's see. Nelson wanted to know, is there a way, or he wanted to know why we remove the log cleaner, because sometimes that log can grow quite large.
What you can do is go to your global settings. Well, the reason why we removed it is for exactly what we're talking about now. So if your site does get compromised, you're going to want to have the breadcrumbs of what happened to your site. And if someone can just simply dump the logs to cover up their tracks, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to recover from attack. But in the global settings, you can set the days to keep the database logs. By default, it's 60, but you can reduce this if you just want to keep a week's worth of logs. Just change this to 7, and that will prevent those logs from piling up if you're having an issue with any kind of database bloat.
Very good. Let's see. I believe that actually brings us to the end of all the questions. Have I missed any questions that are there in the chat? Steve wanted to know, is there a log viewer that you recommend we're writing to file and database to? Is there
what was that?
Yeah, Steve's wanting to know if there's a log file viewer that you recommend. And Steve, I mean, if I understand your question correctly, any text app is going to view a log.
Mm-hmm.
So Steve, yeah. I'm happy to answer that. Just give me a little more clarification. Susan, I did ask you a follow-up question in the chat. I'll ask your question to Michael, but I'm not sure we can answer that question. Let's see. Let me find that original question. Susan wanted to know, Michael, are you familiar with Exum remote software? Somehow not attached to it. Yeah, I'm not either. Somebody said it, commented in the chat that it was something to do with a Unix server, but I'm not familiar with that either, Susan. It's not part of core WordPress, I'll tell you that. So that's not something I can really talk about. Yeah, that is odd. Let's see. Michelle is here. Good to see you, Michelle. Can you import-export security settings between sites? Yes, you can. Michael, you want to show her how to do that?
Yeah. Just go to the import-export, and then you can export it by entering an email address. You import it by downloading and then uploading the file. And if you're using iThemes Sync, you can go to the Security tab, and then you can import-export settings, and then do that all from Sync without logging into any site as well.
Excellent. Nelson wanted to know, he says, sometimes I use IP geoblock to block some countries to my sites. Is that something we're considering integrating into iThemes security?
No, it's not. And here's why. It is, so that you don't, with VPNs and your ability to check out a large block of IPs from anywhere, you can spoof that IP And so you can obfuscate where you're coming from to begin with. And so, especially at the like at the application level, which we would have to do it from the application level. And so we would have to put in that huge block of IPs, and add it to that huge block of a whole country's IPs, which is going to be a ton of IPs. And we're going to have to put it in this ban list. And granted, we can use wildcards, but that also means on each and every single page load, we have to see, is this IP okay to come in? Is this IP okay to come in? Is this IP okay to come in? So what that's going to do, especially if you're doing it from the application level, using like a plugin to do it, you're going to notice some hit to your site performance. So we do not plan on doing that because it's not necessarily who's visiting your site. It's, again, about monitoring the activity that we just talked about, identifying the activity, and putting a stop to that malicious activity. And so taking by like a case-by-case basis instead of just completely blocking a whole set of IPs. That being said, if that's something you want to do, it's actually fairly simple to do. You can Google how to do that and Google the block of IPs associated with a certain country, and then you can then you can throw it into, you can find like a wildcard editor and then throw it in there and then add that to your HT access. Again, I don't recommend doing it. It's not something we plan on adding. And just because, again, it's one of those things that it can cause more issues than the security provides to your site.
Absolutely. Paul's wondering if we have a client blocker so certain clients can't bother him.
What we can do is teach you how to fire a client.
Yeah, that's what freelance leap year is for, Paul. Let's see. Manny wanted to know. Okay, this is a question we get from time to time, and and Sue had a follow-up question in this same vein. Manny wanted to know, sometimes there are issues if the security scan fails. Security error indicates a false positive. Sometimes it's just unable to scan the page with error 500. Sue, kind of in the same vein, says, is there a way to get a better malware report that says the server didn't provide the resources, etc.?
Unfortunately, what we get back from security is either the scan failed or passed. And so when it does result in just a 500 error, it sends it back to us as a failed scan. That being said, like, I understand it's frustrating. It's something I'm looking into to see if possibly we can do something as workaround, because my goal is to make it as friendly as possible, and causing any unnecessary concern is the complete opposite of what we want to do. But we are dependent on the security malware scan API. So some of our options are going to be limited, but it's something I do want to, I was that same conversation I had with Sailor, our designer, that's something I actually brought up to her. Is I wonder if it's time to see if there's more options available for that.
Yeah, this is an ongoing conversation. It's brought up frequently, and this is something we're talking about for sure. Let's see. Sue would like to know, she says, we have a site getting inundated with spam through a contact form. It happens to be a gravity form, even with a CAPTCHA on it. Do we have anything that integrates with a form to help make it more spam proof?
ReCAPTCHA is kind of your best bet when using IT Security Pro, but like if you're still getting spam from that, I would recommend using a plugin that's specifically designed to prevent spam, like a Kismet. Normally, reCAPTCHA does do a lot, but unfortunately, it doesn't prevent every bit of spam from being added to your comments. But yeah, using something like a Kismet could definitely help cut that down for you.
Yeah, Kismet definitely helps for comments on contact forms and gravity forms in particular. So we're seeing the same thing. I manage over 100 sites for clients, and there's a big uptick on form spam, even with CAPTCHA, even with the gravity forms honeypot enabled. The newer form spam is just getting better and better. Also, people are actually hiring people to key in the things. So it's not even a bot necessarily anymore. It's somebody going in and actually doing the copying and pasting. And maybe you've seen some of those.
URL to make it look like not a URL, and then saying in the comment to remove that part of the URL to actually make it clickable. So It's no, they again, it's a constant battle of um hackers do something, we're playing a defensive, but we react to that, and then they have to come up with a new plan, and then we have to react to that. It's a game of cat and mouse for sure.
Yeah, it's tough because at the same time, you want the form to be hard for a spam bot to complete, but not for a real user. And finding the balance between those things is just really, really tough. Here's a great question from Chelsea. She says, we're using WP Forms. I can see the user's IP addresses where the emails are being generated in the email logs. Can you use iThemes Security Pro to ban or block that IP?
Yeah, if you have an IP that you want to block, go to your banned user settings, and then paste that IP right into here, save your settings, and they're banned.
There you go. So it's very easy to do. Let's see. Sue wants to know how many individual IPs can we block before it starts slowing down the site? She says we're using wildcards too.
It's going to be dependent on your site resources. So that's a very, if you're on the worst of worst shared hosting, you might see a slowdown after 50. If you have really robust hosting, you could have 1,000 in there and not have a problem. So it really is just going to be, it really is dependent on your particular environment.
Yeah. Let's see here. So if you have a question you haven't asked yet, we're seeing some questions popping in GoToWebinar. Please ask your questions in the chat room at iThemes.com/chat. We just keep everything together in that spot. And I think, Michael, this is a good time to take a break. It is about 10 minutes till 2 o'clock Central Time. Let's take a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 2 o'clock Central for part 2 of day 2 of the WordPress Disaster Week. We'll be talking about, what are we going to be talking about in the final hour today, Michael?
We're going to talk about setting up a good backup strategy on your site, and then we're going to finally jump into how to use that backup to recover from a disaster.
Excellent. All right, I'm dropping in once again the link to today's slides if you want those, and the replay link for today after, where we'll have the video for today after we are done today, as well as the one from yesterday and all the slides. It all is there. So let's take a 10-minute break. I'll see you back at 2 o'clock Central Time. We'll be quiet until then. It's 2 o'clock Central Time, so we are back for part 2 of day 2, dealing with recovering from a bad situation. As we get into this, we had a couple of questions, one that I think I missed and one that came in during the break. Michael, if you don't mind, let's hit these before we dive into the backup strategy. Steve wanted to know do you recommend any kind of database logging for MySQL?
I'm not sure what you mean by that. Like the iThemes security log does get stored in the database. Are you talking about like keeping track of changes made to your database?
Yeah. Yes.
My general rule is collect as much data as you can. That's my general rule. Like I like to have as much information at my disposal as possible, and so that's something that you can do. You should definitely do it.
Yeah, for sure. The balance there will be how many database hits the site is creating, versus the traffic of your site and so forth, because that could really bog down the site and the server if it's not on good quality hosting. But yeah, again, it's a balance.
That's a great point. Great point.
And Inez asks, is there a way to know which file users are searching for? Reports are coming in from too many accesses to a file that doesn't exist. Is there a way to block those?
That could be that something, typically when that happens, that means that there's a broken link on your site. And so it's, you have two options. One, like if you're using the 404 detection feature and that's bloating your logs, you can either whitelist that in the 404 detection feature, or you can disable the 404 detection feature, or you can try to get that broken link corrected. But typically, if you are having a ton of traffic or a ton of hits on a specific site, it usually means that you have a broken link on your site. And there's different things. There's like free broken link checkers that you can use to scan your site for broken links to see if they're able to identify it. And then, unfortunately, there's these weird like XML Microsoft file that somehow it gets searched for with. It's been a while since I've been down that rabbit hole, but I can't remember the exact details to it, but it's not necessarily always a sign of a hack. And if it's a high number of them, it's probably it might be a broken link on your site.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's talk about backup strategies.
Okay, so the reason why we're talking about backup strategy is it is an important thing to have, because in many cases, whether it's a hack or some kind of data loss, it's a good thing to have a good solid backup strategy to make sure that you can come back from disaster. You should be, the reason why you should back up your site is hack recovery, rollback, broken update, accidental deletion, data corruption. And we're going to try to move by these a little bit fast so we have more time for questions at the end. But these slides will be available, and but feel free to ask any clarifying questions at the end. So the real cost of lost data is going to be the record of sales, if you have an LMS, student progress, your time, and customer trust. So, it is important to have something to come back to, because if you just think about the time that you spent creating the site, the time you spent doing it, you don't want that all just disappearing. So can't I just let my host handle my backups? Now, backups to your host are frequently unreliable and may be difficult to access. Not to mention, if you are ever planning on, for whatever reason, moving off that host, sometimes you can't take those backups with you, and they're not compatible to migrate your site to a different location. So you have a couple different options of choosing a backup method. You can do a manual backup. The benefits of it's free. You can do backup your files using an FTP client, backup your database using phpMyAdmin. You can take a look at this WordPress.org article about WordPress backups to get more information on that. And you can also use a plugin like Backup Buddy. These are typically paid. It's going to be automatic file and database backups. Those are two separate backups, just so you know. One's going to be the server, one's going to be the database. Those are two separate backups, and you need to back up both. It's going to have an easy restore and migrate process, and then WordPress plugin backups is just kind of like having a complete backup strategy in a box. So you're going to have to decide what you want to back up. Plugins, themes, media, WordPress core files, uploads, and database, all are things to consider. So the anatomy of a WordPress site, inside the WordPress install directory, you're going to have your wp-admin, which is going to your wp-admin and wp includes. These are the directories that store the background files that really make your site go. These aren't going to be unique to you. These are going to be included in every WordPress install. The WP content directory stores the plugin, themes, and uploads directory. So you're going to find stuff in here that's going to make your site uniquely yours. The HT access is going to have the different various server rules on it, and the WP can file stores important information like the site's database credentials. So inside the WordPress install directory, that should be WP content directory. You're going to see the plugins, your themes, uploads file, and then again, you're inside the WordPress database. You're going to have it's going to store all your posts, all your comments, your different users, a lot of your WordPress settings, your WordPress URLs, your site URLs and options, security options, and a lot more. And so this is really going to be where where the WP content directory is kind of like the personality of your site. The database is going to be kind of like the brain of your site. That's kind of how I like to think of the two. So the third part of your backup strategy is going to be to choose your backup frequency. How often does the content, when you're choosing your backup frequency, here's some questions to think about. How often does the content change to your site? How much do users interact with the site? How much tolerance do you have for lost data? Whoops, I'm trying to highlight it and I keep forgetting I'm in presenter mode. And so I'm making slides go forward. So how much tolerance do you have for lost data? And so if you don't want to have your backup frequency to be any less than your tolerance for lost data, a good rule of thumb is you should be backing up your site enough to keep up with the changes of your site. Because the last thing you want to do is spend your time, which is your money, redoing things that you've already done. So we are human. We're likely to forget stuff. So, and beyond that, like anything that you can schedule and automate, you should. Um, um, so, um, um, so once you do create a schedule, you can then use a plugin like Backup Buddy to automate those to make sure those are happening exactly when you want them at the frequency you want them. And you're also going to want to choose an offsite location to store your backups. And the reason why is if your actual server gets hacked, you don't want to be worried about your backups also being compromised. If your server crashes, if that host that you're on has any kind of hard drive failures, or if there's any kind of natural disaster. Plus, it's good to have redundancy just in case of any kind of cataclysmic failure. And so, like remote destinations, you can think about like Backup Buddy has, iThemes has their stash storage, which we'll talk about a little bit more. Google Drive is a good place to store backups, Dropbox, Amazon S3. So again, just it's important for redundancy's sake and just for the extra security to have your backup stored in a remote destination. You also want to scan your backups for malware. A backup plan is only as good as your backup. So if you're trying to recover from a hack using an infected site with malware, it's not going to help very much. So yeah, again, just make sure that you're using a clean backup to restore from. And finally, you're going to want to practice restoring. If you are restoring your backup, this means something has gone wrong on your site. The only time you ever really need a backup is when something's gone wrong on your site. And think about that. Your adrenaline's going to be pumping. Your palms are going to be sweaty. The last thing you want to have to do is think about the restore process. This is the most important part of all of it. No matter what method of backup that you choose, you need to know how to do it when disaster strikes. Just think about like, I think about military movies a lot of times when I see this. They practice taking apart their gun and putting apart their gun so they don't have to think about it more. So when you are in that moment of crisis, you don't have to think about it. You can just act. You want it to be second nature because as the adrenaline strikes up and we have that stress, our cognitive ability diminishes. And so we want this to be second nature. So again, I want to stress this, like heavily stress this, because I know talking with people who do Backup Buddy support, people come to the time when they need this backup. They're in that moment of trial and they don't know what to do. So again, very, very important. And some cool things about Backup Buddy is actually you can use Backup Buddy's size map to look exactly where you have the different how big the different storage on your site is. So where is all that memory coming from, all that storage located? Another great thing you should do is you can set in the global or in the default Backup Buddy settings, you can set the database and file default. So you can go ahead and exclude anything that you don't need in the backup and the Backup Buddy general settings. That way you can just, you're only backing up when you need to back up. You can create custom profiles. So for example, if you have like an e-commerce site, you may only want to back up the content of your site once a day, but you should probably still be backing up your database on an hourly basis. That way you don't end up losing any record of sales. So that way you can break your backups into different pieces. One is going to reduce the strain on your site when you are creating backups, because you're only backing up what you need when you need it, instead of backing up your whole site every single time. You can add different remote destinations using Backup Buddy to store your backups on a safe offsite location. Schedule and automate your backups. We're gonna get to. I want to make sure we have time in the questions for the end. So let's go ahead and let's hop back into the Backup Buddy plugin and kind of talk about this stuff so you can just kind of see it in action. Okay, so if you go to your schedules, you can add a schedule and then set a schedule name. And that way right here, you can go ahead and then set it to, if you want to do, let's do a daily backup. And then so once I add this schedule, my site is going to be completely backed up once a day. And if I edit this schedule, I can go ahead and add a remote destination to this, and I already have my stash storage hooked up. So anytime my site's going to be backed up once a day, and automatically going to send my backup to a safe offsite location. But let's go ahead and take a look at our security logs real quick, so we can kind of talk about, kind of go over what we talked about earlier in the first half of this webinar when it comes to what you should monitor, how you should look at it, and how you should check it. So security logs. Ooh, red. Huh. Well, let's see this. Show details. It says my site is infected. Website defaced. Okay. So when we were in the security dashboard earlier, I don't know if you remember this, but when I looked at my user, it showed that I have not had two-factor configured. And earlier it wasn't enforced, but we ran the security check and went ahead and enforced that for me. So let's take a look at the logs and let's see exactly what's happening on this site. All right, so let's go look at all events. And then it looks like malware was found. And then, well, I don't recognize this IP address. And that doesn't seem like a time that I would log. Let me look. Let's take a look at these view details. Let's look at the raw details. Post status change. Okay, so what we're looking at here is that a post status change, this first number is going to be the user ID of 2. I happen to know that my user ID is 2. And the thing that was modified and changed was the post ID of 21. So let's go to these pages real quick, and let me show you how you can see what the post ID is. So if I just go to edit here, you're going to see that post ID at 21. Oh, look, my site now belongs to Anonymous. I was hacked by Anonymous. All right, so we saw that we were monitoring, or we were checking our site for malware, and then we had user logging enabled, and so we identified the site was infected with malware. We were able to use the user logs to identify a strange IP address that we didn't recognize. It was not my own, and then we were able to see that my user modified this post. Okay, so now we should take a look at what time this was. Okay, so it's going to be about 20 hours ago that this was my account was compromised and my site was breached about 20 hours ago. So we can say fairly confidently that the my username and password was used to log in, and that's how my site was exploited from this IP address. So what we're going to do is we're going to restore using a backup. So again, one of the things that my real focus is and my real passion is making things easy when disaster strikes, when stress happens. How can we make it easy as possible for people to fix the problems with the tools that we're providing? And that's where this WordPress dashboard restore feature came in that we released in Backup Buddy the end of last year. So let's go ahead and restore the backup. We have a backup. Oh, perfect. This one is from 21 hours ago. It's a complete backup. So we're going to go ahead and click restore. We're going to restore the entire backup. And we're going to go ahead and confirm and say, yes, proceed. And so what this is going to do, this is going to restore both the database and it's going to restore the files on the site. And then after the restore is done, what we're going to do is we're going to harden the security of the site. We're going to change the password of my user. We're going to add have a strong password. Then we're also going to enable two-factor authentication to prevent this from happening again. And what I like about this restore feature, because again, when disaster strikes, your adrenaline is going to be running. You're going to be scared. If you're using a backup, you're using this restore feature, this means something has gone wrong. So with the dashboard restore feature, with a couple clicks of a button, your restore is done. It's easy. Like other restore processes are going to require you to download the backup from the offsite location. This one was stored in Stash, but I was able to download and restore it from within the backup buddy settings without ever leaving my WPAdmin dashboard. The other one's going to require you to download the file, log into your FTP. When was the last time you logged into FTP? Do you still have a file manager downloaded, like a FileZilla? Do you have your FTP credentials ready so you can log in and then remove the old site, upload the old site, and then yeah, it's just a stressful time. So we wanted to make it easy as possible. And we can see that it is importing the database tables right now. And as this is going through, one thing I want to talk about is if I would have had these other security settings enabled, like trusted devices, which would have recognized that, oh, wow, that IP and that device, that's not, or that device isn't where Michael usually logs in from. So when that person would have gone to the admin dashboard, they wouldn't have been able to modify the home page because it would have got rid of admin privileges. So even if they were able to compromise the account, they wouldn't be able to compromise the site because they wouldn't have the necessary privileges to do it. Had I been using a strong password and not a weak password that may have been involved in a database dump, they would still be trying to guess my username and password. And had I been using two-factor authentication, like Google says, it's 100% effective against bot attacks. So, it's just a culmination of all this thing. Prevention is the name of the game. But when disaster does strike, you want to be able to have a simple solution to bring your site back to a clean state. And why this is finishing up, which it shouldn't be too much longer. If we want to go ahead and let's go real quick. Let's talk about Backup Buddy Stash Live. What's cool about Backup Buddy Stash Live is that once you connect your site to Backup Buddy Stash Live, it will actively track real-time changes. So if you make a sell and that gets recorded in the database, that's going to trigger Backup Buddy to send an up-to-date database backup to your Stash Live account. And so what this is doing is creating a snapshot of your site in time. So anytime that you, for example, like in this instance, you use that snapshot to roll back to a point of where your site is clean. Your backups are stored safely off-site, and then it has file-level malware scanning once you push it up into Stash Live. One caveat right now is that the snapshots are different than the regular Stash backups. So that's not currently the WordPress dashboard restore feature that we're using right now isn't currently available. But guess what? That is in development right now. So here real soon, you will be able to use your Stash Live backups. Use the WordPress dashboard restore with your Stash Live backups. And eventually we're going to be rolling out that functionality to the other remote destinations as well. All right, and Nathan, while this is going, do we have any questions? We're waiting on this to finish.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Roy just asked in the chat. He's noting he's had some issues getting Backup Buddy to talk to Google Drive lately. Any advice there?
Okay, so hit up support because they're going to be able to help you out. What happened is Google changed the way that they handle the app develop or how they confirm a trusted app. And so if you're setting up a remote destination now, you just have to continue clicking past and saying it's okay. Like I trust this, I trust this, I trust this, and they're making it jump through more hoops. And so what we're doing right now is we're waiting to get our iThemes OAuth server approved by Google. That way it's a trusted device, and then it's going to make that whole situation a lot better because you're going to be able to connect your site to Google Drive through the iThemes OAuth server, bypassing all this other junk that they sprung on all of us developers without any warning. I'm not opposed to more security, but it is taking a little bit longer than I wanted for us to get, we've been waiting for over 2 months now to get us approved. So, but hit up support and they'll be able to help you get that communication with Google Drive resolved.
Yeah, for sure. Several folks have asked about if is there a way to determine if a backup contains malware. And by the way, everybody, welcome Josh to the chat. Josh is one of the support wizards for Backup Buddy. Josh, welcome. Appreciate your help there, and hopefully you can get some great answers in there for the folks listening.
And that's one thing I really like about Stash Live is that you can, it gets scanned when it's added to Stash. But what you can do, if you have, you can use, most of your servers are going to be Linux based. So you can use something like ClamAV to scan those files and to make sure there's no malicious malware on them. Josh might, who jumped in the chat, he might have some more tips on or different methods of scanning your backups for malware. Sorry, I'm just trying to get logged back into the site.
Yeah, very. And just to reemphasize, those of you who aren't aware of Stash Live, it's an incredibly powerful remote destination that Backup Buddy can connect to. It's useful in a couple of different situations. Number one, there was a lot of questions in the chat room about, does Backup Buddy work on this host or that host, or notoriously low-powered hosting host.com or whatever. Backup Buddy Stash Live was created for that situation. So Backup Stash Live sips your site over just a little slurp at a time until it gets the whole site backed up. Then it keeps it backed up as changes are made. Now, that's also super helpful. Like if you have an e-commerce site or a membership site where there's lots of activity happening on it, Stash Live is going to keep all of that up to date in the backup. That way you can have something almost immediate to restore. But then also, as Michael just mentioned, all of the backups that are brought over into Stash Live are scanned for malware. So it's a really powerful tool.
Okay, let's hop back over here real quick too. I just want to show that we restored the site. And so to mitigate this from happening again, what we need to do immediately is, because that malicious actor, the hacker, they now have my my password. So what I want to do is just generate a new password, a new strong password, update my profile, and then let's go to the security settings, and then make sure, back to my profile actually, because actually, no, we probably need to enable two-factor authentication, and then we're going to make sure, okay, so now my account, and we've rolled back our site to a clean state, and then we went ahead, we changed the password of my user, and we added two-factor authentication to prevent the site from being taken over again. So that's just an example of how you use your logs. As we can see now that, like, scan the homepage for malware, we're all coming up clean now. Coming up clean, everything's good. That IP, there's no record of the IP even hitting the site, because we restored back to a point before they breached the site and used the two-factor authentication. And I would enable trusted devices right now, but that requires a little bit more configuring to set up, because you have to have a API. But that's something definitely worth checking out and doing. And we have an article in our help center that shows you exactly how to configure that. But sorry, that's all. More? Do we have any more questions?
Yeah. So for the folks that were asking, you weren't actually just hacked, correct?
No. I just wanted to set that up, and that's why I was trying to. When we were looking at the security dashboard, which I left out a card because we can actually add the. Well, it's on there now. I had to remove it earlier, but I had to hide this malware scan card. That way, I didn't give away what we were doing later on. But no, I just tricked security into thinking my site was hacked by defacing the homepage, and wanted to show that, like, I wasn't using two-factor earlier, just to show that the site was a little bit weak. But no, it's luckily I use iThemes Security Pro and have two-factor authentication enabled and a strong password, which is going to protect my site from being hacked.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see, a couple of other questions. Yeah. So while on the subject of stash here, Lydia wants to know, does stash slow down the website?
It does not, because it's not, stash is going to be, okay, so there's two different things. There's backup buddy and there's stash. It's a little bit confusing, so I want to make sure that we are clear. So stash is just a remote destination. This is just where your backups are stored. So stash isn't actually doing anything on your site, but stash live is a backup process, and that's going to actually reduce the typical load of a backup on your site, because it's only backing up what's needed when it is needed. And backup buddy, depending on the size of your site, if you have like a 100 gig site, yeah, it's going to take a little time to make a complete backup. But however, for most sites, it's most sites on good hosting, it's not going to have any cause any slowdown or on your site.
Yeah, for sure. Heather would like to know, how much is Stash Live?
Well, right now it comes with it just comes with Backup Buddy. So right now you can get iThemes Security Pro and Backup Buddy for a 2-for-1 deal. If you see this, and if you're in the iThemes chat, for the people who attend this webinar only, you get both iThemes Security Pro and Backup Buddy, and then every Backup Buddy subscription with this combo deal is coming with extra stash. So depending on what combo pack you get is going to be depend on you're either going to get 5 or 10 gigabytes of stash. So here, I'll bring this up real quick. 1 second. Okay, so I'm trying to get this over to the screen. All right, so you're going to get extra stash. You're going to get both Backup Buddy, if you just want to use regular stash, and the WordPress dashboard restore or stash live. Right now, you get for a single site, it's going to be $80. It's going to be $127 for 10 sites, $199 for 2 sites, which this is the best value because you're also going to get 10 gigabytes of stash, which is just a great deal. Like, really, it is. This is the most stash that I'm aware that we've ever given away with any of our combo packs.
Yes, it is.
So,
Michael, I believe we lost your screen in that process.
Oh, did you lose my screen?
I did, at least. There we go.
Is it okay? Okay, so sorry. But yeah, so this is the deal just made specially for you guys who are a part of this webinar. Is this deal right here, and it's going to include both iThemes Security Pro and Backup Buddy. Everything you need to secure your site and prevent that disaster, and everything you need to come back from disaster.
Great. And that stash, Sue, the stash is a total amount for all of your backups combined that are in that stash space. All right. Let's move on, Michael.
Okay. I'll go back and cover some of this other stuff in a little bit more detail. I just wanted to make sure that we were able to, oh my gosh, if I can stay on this page. Well, that's not what I was trying to do. Come on. Okay. So we can go through these slides a little bit slower. So going back to Backup Buddy, and then one thing that is really cool about Backup Buddy is one thing that we talked about yesterday, but it's worth highlighting again today, is the server diagnostics page, where you're able to see what versions of everything and what are the recommended versions of everything you have installed in your site, whether it is Backup Buddy, WordPress, MySQL, PHP, and then also you can see your relative path and your file permissions and your recommended file. But there's just a lot of great information here. And then also what we talked about earlier is size mapping. So if you need to identify where the majority of stuff is happening in your site, or the majority of like big files that you might need to exclude from your backups, and anything that you have excluded from your backups is going to be highlighted in red. And one other thing I want to highlight when it comes to the restore functionality is that you don't have to restore the whole backup. You can just restore individual files. So let's say that you make an update and that update breaks your site. A little mini disaster, right? And so what we might want to do is just roll back that update. So if this backup version had a different version of the actual plugin installed, it would show up in a different color to highlight that there is a difference in the version numbers. And then you can literally just click it and then restore the one folder. And then that's all you have to do to roll back the update. So that's, I really, really, really like this WordPress dashboard restore feature, just because it makes rolling back from a single update super, super easy. And that's why I would recommend having regular backups. And if you are doing your backups or triggering your updates manually, you should always be doing a backup before you trigger your updates, just in case of something goes wrong. Because I know a lot of times, especially on some poor shared hosts, during an update, the server will time out because it doesn't have a long enough PHP memory, or the PHP memory limit. The timeout limit. So it might be unreasonably low. And so when the update's trying to complete, the site times out before it has a chance to complete. And that's going to create a problem in your site. And a lot of times your site won't even load because it's looking for things that aren't there. Luckily, with the new backup buddy, or not the new backup buddy, the new WordPress maintenance mode, it's able to deactivate those plugins and still get your site to load. So that does help. But at that point, you're stuck with the broken backup in your FTP. And just using this WordPress dashboard restore feature, you just roll back real quick and forget that mess ever happened. And then over here on the destinations page, you can add stash, and then which is the recommended version we have now. We recently added OneDrive, Google Drive, and Amazon support. But let's go ahead and set up Stash Live real quick to show you how easy this is. Let me come over here, get my password. Come on. So yeah, all you have to do to set up Stash Live is enter in your username and password, and then it's going to go ahead and start creating your first snapshot. And like Nathan was saying earlier, like this is done. You don't have to create any schedules, nothing. It's just anytime a change is made, it's going to be sent over to your Stash account, which is located in sync.iThemes.com/stash. And again, little caveat with that: right now, the WordPress dashboard restore feature is not, or the Backup Buddy dashboard restore feature isn't available for snapshots, but that is currently in development, and hoping to have that out real soon. Do we have any other questions, Nathan?
Let's see. Yes, I'm trying to keep track. We get a lot of questions stacked up here. I'm trying to make sense of all of them. Let's see. Let's see. So Sue wanted to know, Backup Buddy recently started uploading the .dat files in remote storage. Can you explain what that's about, and does that interfere with the number of backups that they have set?
No, the .dat file is what is needed to do the WordPress dashboard restore feature. So that's why you're seeing that .dat file now.
Gotcha. Damien is talking about an issue he's had where one of his sites does not have the security dashboard, and he's running the latest WordPress and the latest iThemes security, which is odd.
That is the first time I'm hearing of anything like that. It should be, if you have it enabled in the security settings, and the first thing I would check is some type of conflict.
Actually, so Damien, Damien, you're running an earlier version of iThemes security. The latest version of security is 6.4.2 as of today.
If you're not seeing an update notification, your plugin is probably not licensed on your site, but you can go to settings and then iThemes licensing, and then enter in your username, your iThemes username and password, and then click add license. And then once your products are licensed, you'll receive updates. Another thing is, this is, Damien, I'm gonna apologize for you. This, I don't like that the updater doesn't notify people that there's updates available when the products aren't licensed. And we are currently working to update our updater to make sure people are still informed that they have there's updates that are available even when their plugins aren't licensed. So that's currently in development. Because Damien, that shouldn't happen, and I apologize.
And Michael, maybe show him where to turn on the security dashboard in settings to enable it.
Okay, absolutely. So go to security settings, and then it's gonna be a new module down at the bottom, and then or near the bottom, and then you'll enable it here. And once this is enabled, you can go to your dashboard right here, and then click security dashboard, and then pop up here. And then your first time in, you can either create a dashboard from scratch or use one of the previously, start with a default layout or start from scratch. So, and you can name your board, then you can share your boards on the dash. We did a webinar over the security dashboard and how to share and how to use it, which you can find somewhere on training.ithemes.com.
Yeah, I'm working on that link right now. I'll have that link for you folks in just a minute. All right, here it is right here. So if you want more about the security dashboard, here is the link for that webinar we did not too long ago, actually. Let's see. Other questions? Janet wanted to know, in regard to backup buddying remote destinations, she finds that she receives multiple remote destination send fail email even when the send was successful. Is there something she should be doing that she's not doing?
Not that I'm aware of. If Josh is in chat, maybe he can point you in the right direction. But if not, I would definitely recommend submitting a ticket to our support team to see if they're able to help you identify what the issue is.
All right, that's the end of the questions I have on the list, although I believe there's some that I may have missed. Is there anything else you want to do in the meantime, Michael?
While you're looking for questions, one thing I'll show you guys real quick is the new user groups that we just added to iThemes Security Pro to make it easier to configure settings with. So what we had added here in the user groups, these are going to be all the settings that affect your users. So that way you can make sure you are in complete control of the settings that affect your users. Because as we talked about yesterday, it's all about balancing usability versus security. And with admin users, you might be okay with adding more friction to their site with requiring two-factor authentication and requiring them to have strong passwords. But if you aren't comfortable using the passwordless login features and you have your subscriber users, you probably don't, like a subscriber or customer, you don't necessarily want to create any friction between them and them making a purchase on your site. So you can easily go in to make sure you're seeing the exact settings that are going to affect users. I was really, really excited about this release because there is something that I really do think is important is the balance of security versus usability, just like Nathan has mentioned multiple times today. And knowing exactly how your users are interacting with your site are important. So these settings are going to affect how they interact with their site. So having this in one place where it can be easily configured all in one location, I really think that is a huge release. And again, this was created by Timothy, the head developer of iThemes Security Pro. And since he also has clients and manages clients, like he put this in here because this is a very usable and important feature when it comes to managing security for clients.
Very good.
Able to hunt down any more questions?
Yes. Let's see. Heather would like to know, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I don't think we can answer this question enough because it's always asked. Is it okay to have iThemes and Securi on the same site, or is that duplicate? What do you recommend?
I recommend only having a single. Okay, it just depends. If you're using the security firewall along with iThemes Security Pro, great. But if you're using both of the plugins, If you are, do not enable any similar functionality in both plugins. The reason why is because, like, if you are letting Security manage your WordPress login security and you're letting iThemes Security Pro manage your WordPress login security, they could actually create a conflict causing you to actually be less secure. So anytime, whether a security plugin or another type of plugin, anytime you're enabling or installing plugins with similar functionality, the likelihood, you're increasing the likelihood of a conflict of happening to your site. So my recommendation is only using one plugin, but if you really need to use another one, make sure you're not enabling similar features in both plugins.
Absolutely. Let's see. Question from Kai. Kai wanted to know, is there a way whether a YubiKey could be used with the two-factor of iThemes Security Pro?
Not yet. Well, we are looking into different ways to incorporate the passwordless login of the future. Right now, not everything is supported. WebAuthn is not supported by a whole bunch of different things yet, but we are keeping an eye on it. It's something that is really, really important to me, something that I think is super, super important. It's why all the buzz from these major tech companies all about passwordless logins is getting so much hype, because it is important. And it is something that we have constant discussions about. I had another discussion with Timothy just yesterday about different passwordless login methods that we could implement in the future. To be completely honest and blunt, none of them are currently on the roadmap, but these are things that we constantly are keeping apprised of who has added support for them, which browsers, in what way, and how we can take advantage of it. I know that, for example, I keep up with all the different OSs in development, and I know that with Android 11, they are updating their API. So if your app is already compatible with the Thumbprint API, if the developer just reloads the plugin a little bit, now it'll be compatible with different Face IDs. And then, so I promise you, we're keeping up with all of that, and we really are. When the time is right, we are going to definitely strike on that, because it is something. Really, it's something I'm. This is going to tell you how lame I am. Something I'm really passionate about. So. Yes.
Excellent.
Not now, but eventually.
Let's see. Jose would like to know, where did you get to the settings for the user groups?
Oh, main page of the security settings. It's going to be right up here.
Right there. And so, Jose, if you're not seeing that, then you need to make sure you are updated to the latest version of iThemes Security. Betty, it's another question we get quite a bit, and again, we can't answer this one enough. Betty would like to know, does iThemes Security Pro have a firewall? Is a firewall needed? Why or why not?
iThemes Security Pro does not have a firewall, and that's a deliberate decision, because we don't want to bog down or slow down your site. However, because we'd have to run it on the application level, we'd have to run a PHP firewall, which would require us to add extra page load times to your site. However, we do highly recommend using a web application firewall like Security or Cloudflare, because that's going to be taken off your site, and all that is going to be handled before that request even hits your site, and so it's not going to cause your site to load down. So I definitely would recommend a web application firewall, along with some kind of iThemes or WordPress security plugin to harden the actual application level in your site. But I would definitely recommend keeping that web application firewall on the server level, so that's happening before it even touches your site.
Yeah, for sure. And something you're seeing right there on the screen, Betty, is the network brute force protection as well. So by enabling that feature of iThemes Security, you're also working together with all the other iThemes Security users around the world to keep your site protected. So if one bad actor gets flagged on somebody's iThemes Security site, actually, Michael, just explain that feature and why it's so important.
Oh, the reason why this is so great. So let's say that right now I have a bad actor hitting my site, and then Nathan has that same bad actor hitting his site, and then Betty has the same bad actor hitting her site. Then all of a sudden, that's going to be like, it's going to set off an alert saying anyone who has activated this network brute force protection API key that person who attacked Betty, Nathan, and I are now going to be blocked from even trying to log in or do a brute force attack on anyone else in the network. So once it reaches the threshold for like the network ban, what they're going to end up seeing when they try to access your site is going to be this community lockout message. Your IP has been flagged as a threat by iThemes Security Network. Be gone.
Yep. Very good. So we work together and keep each other safe. Kai is asking about network brute force protection and GDPR compliance. And do you have anything specific to say about that, Michael?
You can take a look at the privacy policy for iThemes Security Pro for all the GDPR related stuff.
Yeah, there's pretty wide leeway, and I'm not an attorney, but there's pretty wide leeway, as I understand it, in GDPR for security related matters. And so I think you have some latitude there, Kai. But that's you can get all the information here on the privacy policy. Let's see here. Any other questions before we wrap up today? So I'll give you another minute or so to ask questions while I talk about what's coming up tomorrow. Do you have something else here, Michael, by the way?
Oh, no. I was just...
Okay. Yes. So first of all, do you want to reemphasize the 2-for-1 combo deal? We've talked about it several times over the last few days. It's a great deal going on with iThemes Security Pro and Backup Buddy and some extra stash storage space thrown in. You can get more information using the ad next to the chat room. I'm going to drop the link in as well right there in the chat. Let me also mention tomorrow I'm going to be talking to you with a client focus. So all of you who work with clients and you're managing multiple websites, I'm going to peel back the layers just a little bit and show you how I use iThemes Security and Backup Buddy in managing client sites and providing security services. Some of the basic settings that I use, how to package and price services and sell those services. It should be a fun day tomorrow if you work with clients. This is something I've been doing for many years. I was an iThemes customer long before I started actually doing anything here on iThemes training. And so I'll just show you folks how I do it. And yeah, it should be a fun day tomorrow.
He wrote the book on this. Will you post a link to your book in the chat so people have an opportunity? It's a really, really good resource. Like, he's not going to self-promote himself, but I'm going to promote him. It's a really, really good resource. It's a really, really good book. And if you have any questions about managing clients, you really should check it out. Like he said, he manages over 100 sites. He's been doing this for a long, long time. He is the expert. Yeah, so myfriendlymonster.com is where it's kind of a hub for the resources there. But yeah, we're going to be talking all about clients tomorrow. It is a favorite topic of mine. One of my passions is helping business owners grow their business, and iThemes products are at the core of my business, and I'd love to show you how to do the same thing. So just a note, it's a different time tomorrow. We've mentioned that several times. It is 10 a.m. to noon Central Time, I realize, and I'm so sorry. That is a terrible time for you folks in Europe. I understand that. However, I have to get on a plane to go to Miami to speak at WordCamp tomorrow, so that I'm sort of limited on the time I'm available. So it's 10 a.m. until noon Central Time. So that's starting 3 hours earlier than we would have been starting earlier this week. So sorry about that for those of you in time zones where that's not awesome, but hopefully you can catch the replay. We will have the replay posted a couple of hours after we wrap up, so there you go. Looking forward to seeing everybody back. I'm going to go ahead and drop in the link for the replay once again. I will have the replay from today available on that page. Just give me about an hour or so. We'll have that up for you. All right, Michael, thanks. Great information today. Any last words as we're wrapping up? I don't see any additional questions. No, I just want to thank everyone for their time and coming out today, and people taking an active interest in security prevention and security recovery is just going to make the WordPress community safer. So I just really appreciate everyone who's here who is taking this seriously. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. Absolutely. Well, folks, thanks again for hanging out with us for the last couple hours. Hopefully you've learned a few things as we've proceeded here. I look forward to hanging out with you tomorrow and sharing some more information about clients. Again, my name is Nathan Ingram, and from Michael and everybody else here at iThemes, hope you have a great evening. We'll see you back here tomorrow, 10 a.m. Central Time, here on iThemes Training, where we go further together.